Good morning. Welcome to the Automated Home Show. Today, I want to share a conversation that I recently had with David Webster, who is a very knowledgeable person when it comes to smart home technology. I wish I was able to have a conversation with David a couple of months ago before I went ahead and split out my home Wi-Fi networks, and that just cascaded into a complete disaster, which I've recovered from, but that could have been avoided if I had the benefit of connecting with and talking to David. The reason I want to share this conversation is, well, firstly, David's an interesting guy and very knowledgeable, as you'll hear, as you'll see. But I really want to share this conversation so that in the future, if anybody is in a similar situation that I was in a couple of months ago, maybe you've got a smart home product and you're considering splitting out your home Wi-Fi network because that's what you think you need to do, or maybe you're just interested, you're just getting started with smart home tech and you're wondering what steps you might want to take before you get started. Maybe you've heard, do something with your Wi-Fi network, split it out. This conversation is for you. I really, really wish that I had have heard this conversation, but unfortunately it took me going through this pain and then since recovering from it and then getting connected with David, he's a lovely guy, for me to learn about these things. And hopefully this conversation helps somebody in the future. So I'm going to put it out there and let me know your thoughts. Look, your comment really caught my attention for a few reasons. Firstly, just like the amount of effort that you've obviously gone into and the time that it took you to write that out. That, like, I mean, you obviously thought about it and you went into just incredible detail here. So I just thought I wanted to thank you for that. And then additionally, it kind of made me feel a little bit, or actually very, very silly, because I wish I'd seen your comment before I went and split up my own home Wi-Fi.
Well, you really shouldn't feel bad about that because I see it all the time. As I mentioned, I'm very active in a number of Facebook groups, and it crops up every single day. So people say, I've switched ISP and now nothing works. Well, who would have thought it? You've got a new router, new Wi-Fi, and it just doesn't occur to them that they will need to do something. It's not just a plug in a new box.
It kind of caught me a little bit off guard because I guess in my mind I was thinking I'm not doing anything to the 5G. I'm just creating a new 2.4. That's what was happening in my head, but of
Mm.
course that's not the way things went.
No, it was sort of secondary to what I've just said. There's an awful lot of urban myth out there about the fact that some smart devices need 2.4 gig, and that somehow mysteriously they're going to try and connect to the 5 gig, and so you have to take it upon yourself to split the bands. And that really annoys me because it defeats one of the most powerful features of dual band routers, which is that it can band steer dual band devices to the best band as you roam around your house. And so this concept of band splitting is just a nonsense. And it turns out, and I think I probably put it in my comments, that there are some devices which have a flawed setup app. It's not the device itself. A 2.4 gig device doesn't have 5 gig radios. It's impossible for it to detect, respond, or attempt to communicate with a 5 gig network. It's just impossible. So, whatever name you give it, it's irrelevant. But people don't seem to grasp that. The difficulty is that a lot of smart life based products use a flawed app, and that app has to run on a device that is connected on 2.4 gig. And it's because when you try and pass the network information to the device so that it can connect on 2.4, it does it directly. And it can only do that if it's using its 2.4 gig radio. So on those instances, it's worth temporarily disabling the 5 gig band. But put it back afterwards. This idea of permanently splitting, it's just ruining the system for the sake of a few seconds work while
Let
setting
me
it
show
up.
you how my nightmare began. Just one second.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so I got this Anki Creator Pro camera, and I've got it set up and running now, right?
Okay.
I like this device. I really, really like it, but I struggled so much to get this silly thing set up because I got to the point in the setup
Mm.
process where it's like, okay, connect it to Wi-Fi, and it just wasn't happening. It wasn't doing it. And then somewhere, either on the box or in the user manual, that's where I saw requires 2.4. And then I thought to myself, I don't have 2.4. I only have 5, right?
Yeah. Well, of course, that's never the case. Do you know, I have never come across an ISP supplied router, or any router actually, that only has 5 gig. They're just not
Well,
out there.
yeah,
But because because the default is that the bands are merged because they've got the same name, people aren't aware of it, and so they jump to the conclusion that you did.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, and now that I understand things, thanks to going through this process and your comment and talking to you, I feel incredibly stupid. But I'm sure this happens every day to many, many people.
Every single day, which is probably why my comments felt rehearsed, because I actually have written them several
Yeah.
times. Um, it, it, there is so much misinformation out there. That's the real bugbear. I see comments literally every day. Are you using the 2.4 gig band? Well, of course you are. If you can see it, the device can only receive 2.4.
Okay,
So
so
it's
here's
there.
something I don't understand even now, right? I've got this camera. It says that it requires 2.4. So before I split, when I only had the merged network, why could my network not connect to this device?
It wouldn't be the network that's having the difficulty. It's the app that you use to set it up.
Hmm.
Um, uh, that's what I presume, because that's usually the case. There are some other cases where it might be something different. Um, But usually it's that the app that you're using to set it up is running on a dual band device, which, because of band steering, has decided to connect on 5 gig. And therefore, the 2.4 gig radio is not available to the app to communicate directly with the device.
Okay.
So the trick is to temporarily just disable the 5 gig. I, I understand why manufacturers do it that way, but it causes so much grief. You may have come across some Wi-Fi devices that are single band only. They have a setup mode which they call AP mode.
No.
Have you seen that? Access point, and that uses a different principle. The idea is that when you plug the device in for the first time, it becomes its own Wi-Fi network and it broadcasts a name. And so in your app, you connect to that, and therefore you are by definition using
Okay.
2.4. It can't
Yeah,
possibly
I
be
have
anything
actually
different.
experienced that now you mention it.
And yeah, so there are two ways of doing things, and some vendors actually have support both modes. But more often than not, the the flawed app, they're all the solutions that I told you, but they do make it difficult. And uh, as I said, there's just so many people putting these myths out there that you've got to split the band that it's become um, folklore, if you will. You know,
Well,
it's just wrong.
in your comment, you gave a few suggestions on how to potentially solve this problem. You already mentioned temporarily disabling 5G, but I like your other suggestion about just walking to the limits, to the edge of
Yeah.
range. And when you're just hovering in and out of range, take 1 or 2 steps back in, and you know that's going to be 2.4 because 2.4 has longer range than 5G.
That's right. Yeah, it's just simple physics. The 5 gig signal is a higher frequency, so it's more readily attenuated by obstacles. And generally speaking, a 5 gig network has about 80% of the coverage of a 2.4 gig network, which of course is why all these smart devices opt for 2.4. It's got the best performance and it's the lowest cost because you don't have the expense of having dual radios. So yeah, that's a trick. There is a little caveat which I didn't mention, and that is once you've moved the app to that just connected point, it also has to be in range of the device that you're trying to set up. So it may be that if you've got a smart bulb or smart plug and it's still way back where the router is, it may not connect. So my suggestion would be if it still doesn't work, bring the smart device temporarily to be closer to where you are, because it's communicating directly, not via the router
Hmm.
at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. You just answered my next question, which is probably a stupid question, but it's something that I thought about. And since you're an expert, I'll ask you. And that is, why do manufacturers force this upon us mere users that like must be two? Like, why not five?
Yeah, well, there are very few smart plugs. I don't know about smart bulbs, but there are a few that are dual band. And interestingly, the vendors of those have latched onto this problem and they sell them as 5 gigahertz Wi Fi devices. That's not strictly true. They're actually dual band and they're more likely to connect on 2.4. Um, so, yeah, there are a few out there. But really, the problem is that there are so many vendors that are sticking a label on a product which they've licensed from somebody else, and they're wholly dependent on Smart Life as the platform to control it, and they choose at some point to go with an app that is a customized version that they can make it look as though it's their own. But there must be some sort of licensing deal, and I suspect it's cheaper to go with the method that is flawed rather than supporting access point. And it may be because they're using cheap chipsets in the device itself. But ultimately,
Cost,
it's
always the
money.
answer, right? And you know what
Yep.
really infuriated me about this product? I got it. I tried to connect it. I
Yeah.
couldn't. I thought, you know what? I'm just not going to connect it. And then I got another camera and the same thing. That one says, hey, we need 2.4. And that's when I bit the bullet. I split things up and then set my whole life into chaos. And then after doing that and then going through device by device for the next couple of days and repairing things, reconnecting things, after doing that, then on this box somewhere or on the user manual, I saw that it boasts 5 gigahertz compatible. I said, no, 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 don't even try that now. Don't you dare try that now.
Yeah. Well, we can sort of take a sidebar here and just discuss how band steering works, because what most people don't understand is it's always the device that decides where it's going to connect to. It's never the network that you're connecting to. Um, so if it's got dual band radios, what happens is that when it comes into a new environment, it pings out little beacons on both 2.4 and 5, and it's up to the network to respond to those. And then if the network sees that it's being pinged by 5 gig and 2.4, it says, you're a dual band device. Therefore, I can apply band steering. And if you have got a good connection on 5 gig, I'm going to steer you to use that. And so there is an element of intelligence going on in the router, and that's the band steering feature. But what's so cool about that is that if you move around your property and there are certain locations that are the opposite, and it's 2.4 that's the better signal and the better performing, the device will choose to go back to 2.4 and the router will choose. And that's why disabling 5 gig is such a bad idea, because you defeat that useful ability for it to get the best connection as it moves around. But there is the other consideration here, and that is that if the device doesn't have a 5 gig radio, which is what some of yours have and others, the router can never identify it as dual band capable because it's not able to communicate. Therefore, it can never apply band steering to it. People are under the impression that the router arbitrarily decides to move things to 5 gig. No, it doesn't. It only moves 5 gig signals. Moves devices that have got 5 gig signals. It's as simple as that.
So the reason that I couldn't properly connect this camera was probably the app.
Hmm.
And
Oh, almost
is there
certainly.
anything that I
Yeah.
could have done to
But
solve that problem or nothing?
Other than run the app on a device that is single band only and connected on 2.4. Otherwise, you've got to go to the router and disable
Or
the high-fix
like you
to
said, do you
stop the dual.
think if I took that app and the device to the limit of range of Wi-Fi, that would have worked there, right? Okay. If only I had have spoken to you. Why couldn't we have had this conversation before before I went? See, it took me doing that to get connected to you.
Yes, yeah, and I don't always respond to people on YouTube, but I could see you were struggling with it, and I thought that I have something useful to let you
Thank
have.
you. I mean, you could probably see my emotions on that day. I was in shambles. I was like, oh, what have I done? I thought I was making progress, and now I've just taken
Yeah,
10 steps backwards.
yeah, yeah. Uh, yes, what I see oftentimes is that people get very frustrated and they just give up and send the kit back. And it's because of their lack of comprehension. The difficulty we've discussed many of the difficulties that these things have and the manufacturers have forced on us. My hope is that Matter devices over Wi-Fi will resolve many of those problems. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Matter as a standard
A
yet,
little bit.
but a little bit. Okay. Well, one of the things that the Matter standard requires of Wi-Fi devices is they also have a Bluetooth radio. And so, what actually happens with their setup app is it uses Bluetooth to the device, which needs no setting up and no messing around with router settings. And so, if the app knows your network configuration, it can send it directly to the device by Bluetooth. So, it has to be within Bluetooth range. So, all of the problems that we've discussed just go away because the app is able to talk to the device without any setting up whatsoever.
Sounds promising. I guess we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, yes, promising, but yeah, I think Matter. I had very high hopes for Matter, but it's dragging its heels. It's been 2 or 3 years since the first version was announced, and products are still very thin on the ground. But that's how it's supposed to work for Matter over Wi-Fi. But that still doesn't solve the classic problem we talked about earlier, which is when the customer then goes ahead and changes their router to a different ISP because the Wi-Fi is now changed. All these devices that were previously set up now don't know how to talk to it. So they've got to go through the process again. And I don't know enough about Matter to tell you how they envisage you doing that.
Ah.
But
Ah.
yeah, uh, apart from doing a reset and doing it over again, it seems to me that perhaps at some point in the future somebody will produce a Matter compatible router, and that when you change router or ISP and you get a new one, it will somehow resolve itself. But it's not there yet. So my gut feel is that Matter over Wi-Fi is still flawed, and my preference is Matter over Thread, which is somewhat similar to Zigbee, as I'm sure you know.
Well, I'm not sure if I actually have any
So
Matter devices at the moment. I have some Zigbee devices. I've got some Makara products, and I think mostly
okay,
they are Zigbee.
yeah, yeah. Well, I use a lot of Zigbee, and um, if it's a Matter device, it will proudly display the Matter logo on it, so there's no mistaking it. But as you probably know, a lot of Zigbee devices are becoming Matter enabled, not the device itself, but the Zigbee hub, bridge, gateway, call it what you will, understands how to make the Zigbee devices available to a Matter controller. And that's how people like Philips Hue have decided to go with it for their Hue devices. But you probably know that Philips also produced the Wiz range of Wi-Fi
No,
smartphones.
I don't think I know that.
Okay, the parent company was Philips, and that changed to Signify, and Signify have bought a whole bunch of companies, including Wiz. which is a sort of low-cost Wi-Fi version of Hue. It's not really as powerful, but all the Wiz products have got Bluetooth in and always have done. So they were born ready to be Matter devices directly. So at some point, it seems probable that Philips stroke Signify will make the two interoperate. But I think for commercial reasons, they probably will resist that. Technically, they could.
Yeah. Look, this could be a silly question as well, but you're talking about Matter Wi-Fi devices. They need to have Bluetooth radio. And why
Hmm.
is that?
It's purely for the setup. The Bluetooth is never used for control, so it's a
Okay.
one-time thing. When you get the app and you get the device, they pair over Bluetooth. The Wi-Fi information is then transferred to the device. It joins the network and says, "Hey, I'm a Matter device. Matter controllers, come find me and connect to it." And so the Bluetooth is not control, which is confusing. Again, there's folklore out there
Yeah,
which says
that's what I was
otherwise,
thinking
which
about.
isn't
And that's
true.
why I asked the question. Would an alternative be like an AP solution, as you mentioned earlier?
It could be, but that's not how that's not how Matter defines how it works. They insist on it being Bluetooth. I think there are other variations of it, but have you played with
No, not
HomeKit
at
at
all.
all? Okay, yeah. You get Apple HomeKit devices to join a HomeKit network by typing in the serial number or scanning a QR code on the product, and Matter supports both of those as well. So I think that there probably are some Wi-Fi devices out there that do not use Bluetooth but use the code or the serial number. Certainly, I've recently been experimenting with joining the IKEA Dirigera, I think that's how you pronounce it, their smart hub, which has become Matter enabled by a firmware update. And I've been able to connect that via Matter to Homey, which is the smart hub I'm using at present. And that didn't involve Bluetooth, that was just using the serial number or the code and
Oh,
enabling
cool.
it
I'm
on
also
both
using Homey.
platforms. So
Yeah.
you are? Oh, cool. Yeah. We're in the minority.
Well, look, as you know, I'm a beginner. I'm in the early stages here, and I'm kind of finding my feet, finding my way. Let's talk about Homey and Zigbee devices for a moment. I know this is a bit of a tangent from the main point, but I recently struggled with another thing that I don't know if you saw this or not, but I had 3 Akara Zigbee lights. I was trying to put them outside, and I stood outside trying to, put the lights into pairing mode, probably for an hour, trying to get all 3 of these different light bulbs onto I failed dismally. I shared my
Yeah.
failure, and similar to yourself, somebody else saw my, despair, and they left a helpful comment. And they gave me a couple of tips, and thanks to their comment, I was able to get those Zigbee lights connected, and now they're working perfectly.
Oh, yeah. Um, I didn't see that, so I don't know what was said. But the usual problem with Zigbee pairing is that it's best done close to the hub and then move it to its final location. And at that point, if when you move it, it fails, you know you've got a range issue because it should be working and it isn't. And at that point, you need to consider how to use repeating devices to boost the mesh to reach it. Was that what
I
your
don't think that
experience
was
was?
the issue, and the reason I don't think that was the issue was because I've got an Akara water leak sensor, which is actually further away from the hub than these
Mhm.
3 light bulbs that I'm talking about. And the suggestions from this other person, couple of things he suggested. Firstly, he said, I could just take 2 of the light bulbs out and do them one at a time. And then when it's connected, take that one out, put the next one in, do that. I tried that. That didn't work. Maybe if I persisted and tried a few times, that might have worked. But his second suggestion, which did work, was take them all out, bring them all inside, do them one by one at a lamp, connect it, and then label it so you know which one it is, where it's going, and then do them one by one. That worked for me. Not the first time, but I
Yeah,
persisted and
yeah,
I got them all connected.
yeah. Some devices really insist on having a strong Zigbee signal in order to pair in the first place. Others are less fussy. I've discovered that with Homey as well. Some of my IKEA Zigbee devices, they they work best if you pair them within a really short distance of the hub and then move them to where you want them to be. But as you know, Zigbee is a self-healing mesh. So if you move a device further away, as long as it's in range of a repeater, it will find a path back to the hub. It doesn't ever communicate point to
And does
point.
that mean that each and every Zigbee device that you add in your home helps strengthen the network and they will become a quasi repeater?
Not entirely true, but if it's mains powered, it usually is. If it's a battery powered device like a remote control or a motion sensor, something of that sort, then they're never repeaters because they would use too much power and the battery would go
Uh-huh.
flat instantly. But mains powered bulbs and plugs, and there are plug in repeaters that are nothing more than just a device for boosting it. IKEA sell a Zigbee repeater for a very modest amount of money, and that works well on other brands. Anything that's Zigbee 3.0 is probably good to go.
That's interesting because we have IKEA here in Malaysia, and I might have to go and visit and see if they've got any. It's probably a different range from the UK, but I might go and have a look at some point.
Oh, I'd be surprised if they don't have it, but IKEA have a surprisingly large product portfolio of smart products now, sensors and smart blinds and plugs and that. In the UK, to give you some idea, they just exchanged their um, older smart plug design for a new one, and it's pretty much half the price. I've no idea whether what the currency and conversion is, but in UK terms, it's like under £7 for a smart plug, a Zigbee smart plug. I'm sure you can get cheaper ones from AliExpress or whatever, but with the IKEA warranty and the big name assurance that it meets safety standards, why wouldn't you buy it? You know, it's crazy. So yeah, I've tried a couple of those devices, and I use any number of other IKEA Zigbee devices, and generally they work well, although not always. The trouble with having a closed system like IKEA uh, is that their implementation of Zigbee suits their own needs, but it's not necessarily identical to everybody else. So some devices don't play well with all hubs and all other systems. Um, but you know that's the commercial
Well,
reality
I'm
of
not
all
even
of them.
sure where the nearest IKEA is from our home, but yeah, if I get a chance, I'll definitely swing by and take a look and see what they've got because I'm in the phase of
Yeah.
my growth, I guess, at the moment where I'm just looking for more toys, more devices that I can, connect, and I'm just adding things one piece at a time.
Well, I have found over the years that the two must-have things for me on automation are lighting and I think that's incredibly important, and there's lots of automation possibilities there, which really do add to convenience. That you get so used to the idea of walking into a room and the lights just turn on as you nip up and down the stairs and all that kind of stuff. It, 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 it it's sorely missed when it doesn't work for whatever reason. But smart blinds are my second priority. Um, if you've got a lot of windows and you need window treatments to control natural light, um, it's such a chore to have to go around opening and closing them every day. And you know, nothing says more about your presence than the fact that they don't go up and down. So you know, vacation mode, as the Americans call it, simulating occupancy. They have a great term for that. They call it mockupancy. Yeah, it made me laugh the first time I heard it. But anyway, having the blinds operate automatically is a really important thing for me. I love it. And it's not just a simple thing again of opening at sunset. Sorry, opening at sunrise, closing at sunset. That's too blunt an instrument. You need to do something a little bit more sophisticated than that. But yeah, I rely on those
It's
quite a
on the
lot.
list for something I want to look at in the future. I'll be honest, it sounds a little bit daunting to set up some motors, and especially in our current home where we live at the moment, I don't even know if it's going to be possible to do any smart curtains because we've kind of got like a curved window. I don't know how that would work,
Oh,
but
yeah,
we do.
it is possible, but it won't be an
Yeah,
inexpensive
or maybe I could
solution.
just do a portion of it up until the curve because it's actually split. They're actually two different
Yeah.
parts of the curtain. But I kind of am treating this home as the first lap around the block because we are planning to move probably about 12 months
Mhm.
from now. And then I'll take all of the things that I learn from the next 12 months living in this home and all the devices that we add here. And then when we move into the next home, I'll be much better prepared to not split our Wi Fi and to set things up properly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I speak highly of the IKEA blinds. I've had good experience with those. They're as close to plug and play as you can hope for, I think. So yeah, take a look at those. But yeah, it's an expanding area, and as you may or may not realise, there are options on how to power those. You can use battery or wired power, and IKEA a battery, which is great. But the trouble with battery powered blinds is that sooner or later you're going to have to charge the batteries up, and stringing a USB cable across the room and plugging it in for several hours is not my idea of a good health and safety practice, if nothing else. So, having removable batteries that you can take down and swap out with a freshly charged one is my preference. That's actually how the IKEA ones work. So that's quite neat. But my really preferred solution is wired power because there's nothing more irritating than going away and finding that your blinds have stopped working because the batteries have failed while you're not there.
Yeah, I think
So
if I ever get into the situation in the distant future where we're going to move into a forever home and maybe even build it from the ground up, well, then these are the sorts of things that you'd like to think about in advance.
mhm. Yeah, uh, pre-wiring, if possible, is always a good
Mm,
thing. And if you haven't heard it elsewhere, I'll tell you now. If you can run one wire, run two,
mm.
because cable is cheap, and using Cat5 or Cat6 cable in multiples rather than singly is always a good plan because you
Always good to
never
have a
know.
backup, right?
Oh yeah, well sooner or later somebody will put a nail through a cable, and
Yep.
then what are you going to do? But no, it's more a case of there are other applications. Which interestingly, that takes me back to thoughts about Wi-Fi. I don't know whether you've spotted this, but I imagine you haven't got much in the way of a wired network
No.
at present. No, no, most people don't. I was fortunate enough when I moved into this property, and the reason I chose it was well, one of the reasons is it has that structured cable already installed, so I've got Cat5 points everywhere. So that was a real boost. So I do use quite a lot of wired devices, but my property was built quite some while ago, and so it's only got Cat5e cable, which is limited to a gigabit Ethernet. And with fiber optic broadband now exceeding 1 gig, at some point that's going to be an issue. And so here's the interesting dilemma: it's now got to the point where Wi-Fi speeds exceed the wired speed, which is very surprising, really. But it hasn't been a problem for me yet, but it's on the horizon.
So, what would that mean if you don't make any changes to your infrastructure? Would that be a case of you just throttled at 1 gigabit, or would it cause, or would something
Yeah,
eventually break?
it won't break; it'll just be throttled. So my ISP has started offering a 1.8 gig service, to the house, which is double what I'm currently getting. I'm getting 900 megabits. So that's well within the 1 gig limit of the wired devices. But if I were to go for the double the speed, I wouldn't be getting more than 1 gig because my computer, which we're using to talk to now, would be throttled by all my 1 gig cable, but also my gigabit Ethernet switches and my gigabit Ethernet router. So at some point, they've all got to be replaced with something new. Now, you probably know this, but you can get 10 gig cables, cable, cable, which is Cat 6 or Cat 6A. I haven't got that option. I'm not going to rip the walls apart to change the cables. But manufacturers have produced intermediate systems which can use Cat 5e at slightly higher speeds. So 2.5 gig and even 5 gig is possible on Cat 5e if you use the right products. So I've got a little bit of hope. I can probably upgrade the boxes and squeeze a bit more out of it
Oh,
that way.
wow.
But in the meantime, my Wi-Fi is
Yeah,
plenty fast.
plenty fast. But like, let's say 5 years from now, I'm thinking about building a forever home. I'm thinking about these problems. How can you future proof when things change? I think you just have to say, you know what, it's fast enough. It's fast enough to check my emails and watch YouTube, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Uh, I take issue with this expression future-proof because there's no such animal. um, uh, I understand what people mean by it, obviously. A more apt description is probably future-ready, or my particular favourite, future-leaning. You can't be future-proof. I mean, I've seen so many changes in technology that this property was built around certain concepts. I don't know whether you're familiar with Sky TV in the UK,
Yeah.
but when Sky HD boxes came around for the first time, not Sky HD, Sky Plus as it was, they needed two LMB feeds so that it could record one program and watch something else. And this house was only built with one cable from where the satellite dish is. So that's an immediate problem. And you certainly don't want to be doing, as many of my neighbours have done, start running cables down the outside of the house. That's not very attractive. So you end up having to do more complicated solutions, which I found a way of doing it. But this house was probably sold as future proof, and it clearly isn't. It was future ready, but it's only near future. It's not far future, And so future proof is not real.
Like you say, things change so quickly.
Oh yeah, really quickly. Um, so the best that you can do is the state of the art at the time. But of course, you can also choose poorly. If you invest a lot of money in a technology that turns out not to be the mainstream. Um, I'm trying to think of an example of that, but yeah, it's kind of the VHS beta thing, really. You can back the wrong horse. So probably just taking the next step is probably good
Well,
enough. And of course, many people move on anyway, so you can leave it for
well,
somebody
that's
else
that's
to deal with.
maybe a nice segue into my decision to choose Homey, which you're using Homey as well, because I kind of thought, hey, maybe this is going to be one of the better available choices for the next few years. I'm kind of betting on Homey, but perhaps we can leave that conversation for another day because we've already covered quite a lot.
Yes, I'm very open to that. Yes, yeah. I will just mention that I'm still processing the transition of my smart things based devices to Homey, and there's been a few mishaps along the way on that one.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with David. As you can see, he's a super smart guy, and we found out that we are both actually using Homey. So at some point in the future, maybe I'll have another conversation with David where we can talk a little bit more about that and maybe some other things as well, because he's obviously got a lot of in-depth knowledge, and I really, really like the way that we can sort of interact with each other him being the guru, the expert, the guy with all the experience and all the wisdom, and me coming at this more as the beginner, and I'm asking some of the beginner questions. And David was very receptive of those beginner questions. So I like the way we kind of interacted there. And hopefully, like I said, if not entertaining for people that already know this stuff, and I'm sure there was something in there for everybody regardless, but really, I'm just hoping that we can help one person in the future to not make the same sort of mistake that I made, and that's why I'm sharing this conversation. That's pretty much it for this one. I'm going to have an update coming soon about the state of my smart home. I've got some more products on the way. I've got some more products that I'm going to be setting up shortly, but I'm going to wrap it up, keep it tight on this particular update. As usual, if you want to get in touch, you can reach me, Marty, at automatedhome.com. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.